Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. Let's begin with the first article that is based on the question of death penalty and the need to reform the criminal justice system in India. The author here is appreciating the work done by Chief Justice of India UU Lalit in his short tenure, specifically with respect to the death penalty. Now, as you know, Chief Justice of India UU Lalit only has a very short tenure of 70 odd days. During this particular tenure, he has actually tried to bring in multiple reforms. For example, he announced that even during the vacation, there will always be at least one constitutional bench operational in the Supreme Court. He also said that there needs to be longer working hours so that we can resolve cases at a much faster pace in the Supreme Court. However, the author here is mainly focusing on the Chief Justice of India's decision to reform the concept of death penalty in India. Now, as you know, India is still one of the few countries in the world where death penalty is allowed. Although it is only given in the rarest of the rare cases, but still the fact remains that death penalty is a reality in India. However, as per the author, Justice UU Lalit, along with some other judges in the Supreme Court, in the recent cases of Prakash Vishwanath and also in the case of Mohammad Feroz, has actually tried to reform this system. Now, let's try and understand how. As per the author, the problem with death penalty in India is that while the courts announced death penalty, there were no clear guidelines regarding that. Yes, we did say that it would only be given in the rarest of the rare cases, but still, we see a lot of randomness in how these death penalties have actually been awarded in India. That is why the Chief Justice of India now is trying to form proper guidelines according to which the death penalty may be given. The focus of the Chief Justice of India is on framing guidelines regarding potential mitigating circumstances to be considered while imposing death sentences. Now, what exactly are these mitigating circumstances? There have been multiple reports that have come out, and I'll give you an example of a report titled Death Worthy. Death Worthy is in fact a report that is published by a non-government organization called Project 39A. This organization published this report in which they have actually given an account of the number of people who have been given death penalty in India, and they have actually tried to understand how many of these suffer from different types of problems. How many of these don't have good education background? How many of these are suffering from some mental trauma because of which they might have gone ahead and taken part in this crime? This is why these justices, led by Chief Justice of India UU Lalit, are trying to frame proper guidelines so that death penalty is only given to those who really deserve it. The author says that as per the Chief Justice of India, the death penalty should be given only and only when there is proper chance given to the convict to actually make his arguments heard. As we discussed earlier as well, for example, today if the judges say that yes, a person is guilty, that doesn't mean that today itself the decision of the penalty should be given. If the person is held guilty today, there should be another hearing in which the lawyers will now argue about how much sentence should be given, should death penalty be given or not. Meaning that enough time should be given in order to ensure that proper decisions are made in the court. In fact, Chief Justice of India said that this should be a part of the law. The parliament should in fact pass a law making it compulsory that before giving any sentence, there should be proper hearing even after the person is held guilty, so that the decision is not very harsh on the person who is a convict. Now, yes, capital sentencing is an option that is open in India, but there are a lot of circumstances that we need to take into consideration. The author here is also saying that there are two steps that are important to be taken in the future if the work of the Chief Justice of India has to be continued. Number one, a larger bench should be made in the Supreme Court of India so that proper guidelines can be made. As you know, the current Chief Justice of India is all set to retire on November 8th. After him, we will have Justice D.Y. Chandrachud as the Chief Justice of India, and the onus to take this work forward will lie on him. Secondly, he also says that we must understand the makeup of the mind of the people who are actually being given death penalty. As a society, we need to give them proper chances to be heard. Yes, it is very easy to have a lot of hate for people who actually commit crimes, especially serious crimes, heinous crimes. But even then, as a society, we need to give them enough chances to be heard. Only then death penalty and the criminal justice system in India as a whole would actually serve its real purpose. There are a lot of psychological disorders that the person might be suffering from before or after conducting the crime, and we cannot ignore that just by saying that the person has committed a heinous crime. Now, I have taken this data from the same website of Project 39A that I was talking about. Project 39A, if you go to their website, you can see their report as well, which is called Death Worthy, and you see a lot of statistics as well. In one of the statistics, you can see how many death sentences have actually been given in the Sessions Court in 2018-2019. Out of these in 2019 specifically, how many have been confirmed by the High Court and then in the Supreme Court? As you can see, with every single stage, the number of confirmations of death sentences actually keep on reducing. Meaning that the number of people who are given death sentence, let's say in 2019, is 102 here, then it gets reduced here to just 26. Then those 26 also will then go forward, they only get reduced to 6. Meaning that the Supreme Court found only 6 people to be eligible for death sentence out of over 100 that were actually given death sentence by the Sessions Court. This is why even at the Sessions Court level, there have to be proper guidelines about who should be given death sentence and who should not be. When you talk about death penalty in India, there are certain very, very important cases in India's history with respect to death penalty in the Supreme Court. For example, there was a Jagmohan Singh versus the state of UP case of 1973, in which the Supreme Court said that death penalty is constitutional because it was appealed that Article 21 says that we have right to life. Then how is it that the judiciary can take away right to life? But the Supreme Court said if life is taken away as per constitutionally permissible methods, then it would be allowed. Thus, it upheld the concept of death penalty in India. Then in 1979, we had the famous Bachan Singh case versus the state of Punjab, where the Supreme Court held capital punishment should only be given in the rarest of the rare cases in India. The problem is that this is not clearly defined. There is no proper definition of this. Then in 1983, we had the Machi Singh versus the state of Punjab case, in which again the Supreme Court outlined certain factors to determine whether or not a case should be considered as the rarest of the rare case or not. For example, firstly, if the offense committed is so exceptional that there is no chance of awarding any other sentence. Secondly, if the weightage given to the mitigating circumstances, even after those circumstances still say that the person should be given death penalty only and nothing else. These are some of the guidelines given by the Supreme Court to decide whether or not the person deserved the death penalty or not. The next article we want to discuss is about the COP27, which will be coming up very, very soon. COP stands for Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC. This is the highest level of international meeting when the nations around the world come together specifically to discuss the issues on climate change. The 27th such conference will be held in Egypt starting from November 6th. The author here has written the article saying that there is an urgent need for the nations to realize the fact that the goals that they have set for climate change are just not enough. All these talks of accepting renewable energy, all these talks of cutting down the consumption of fossil fuels are just on paper. In reality, we see around the world how erratic climate situations have actually harmed so many people's life, have also killed so many people and are making the situation just worse year after year. That is why some drastic measures have to be taken in COP27, which will be held in Egypt starting from November 6th. It was in COP21, famously called the Paris Climate Change Summit, where the national commitments were made by nations across the world to cut down their greenhouse gas emissions. Last year in Glasgow also, India made a remarkable announcement when the Prime Minister announced that India will achieve net zero by 2070. Similarly, COP27 has to be even bigger and many more announcements have to be made. The author here is saying that there is no doubt that the rich nations are responsible much more than any other nation for the climatic problems that we are facing right now. It is their industrialization, it is their pollution of the past that has harmed the environment in the entire world. That is why it is only fair that the rich nations are responsible for financing any climate change efforts. Apart from the rich nations, the other nations also have to take responsibility. He says that the top 5 emitters around the world, China, US, India, Russia, Japan, also must cut down on their emissions as soon as possible. Even if you look at the aims that have been set up by nations across the world, that are just not enough to restrict Earth's global temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius as per the Paris Climate Agreement. So all these commitments have to be much more aggressive. Now the problem is rich countries keep on saying that how can we give the money? We don't have so much money. How can we actually ensure climate financing? But if you see the past, whenever there have been a big crisis, the rich countries have actually been able to spend huge amounts of money to actually mitigate those crises. For example, look at the global financial crisis. Look at the COVID-19 crisis, in which $15 trillion or so was committed by the rich nations for vaccine development. That was because everyone around the world thought that it is a serious global emergency. So why can't we look at climate change with as much seriousness as we looked at COVID-19? Because this is no joke and we need to take some actions. Even then, the goal set by UN that the rich nations should contribute at least $100 billion every year for climate finance has not been met, because the rich nations keep on saying we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money. The one good news that has come up recently is that Singapore has announced that it will also achieve net zero emissions by 2050. As you know, there have been different timelines set by different nations. US has a different timeline. Europe has the most competitive timeline. India has set 2070. China, on the other hand, has set 2060 as their date for going net zero. But as per the author, these timelines are just not enough. China, despite being a leader in renewable energy, actually uses coal and gas for over 70% of its energy needs. Thus, nations such as India and China need to advance their net zero date to at least 2050, if not more. Because if we wait till 2060, 2070, it will be extremely late. Yes, nations such as India and China are still dependent majorly on fossil fuels, but looking at the future, we must take certain harsh steps. Also, if the developed nations are not ready for financing, international banking systems must now come up to help the other developing nations. For example, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, etc., have to come up and help those nations who are trying to adopt renewable energy. The governments across the world must also stop giving any subsidy to fossil fuels. They should not make fossil fuels cheap or affordable so that the people may shift to other forms of energy. All of that has to be done in COP27, otherwise, it will be very late. As I told you in the beginning, COP stands for Conference of Parties. This is the highest decision making body of the UNFCCC, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This has its headquarters in Germany's Bonn. Every single year they have a meeting. Usually by default the meeting will be held at Bonn. But if any other nation volunteers that we will be the one that will be hosting the meeting, then the meeting gets hosted in that particular city. Then the meeting gets hosted in that particular country. Otherwise, if no one volunteers, then Bonn is the place where the COP meeting will be held. Usually, the president of the COP rotates amongst different regional groups of Africa, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, and Central and Eastern European and Western European and others. Usually, whichever country has to nominate the president, it is the environment minister who gets this post usually, but this is not always the case. There have been multiple COPs in the past that have brought out certain significant decisions. Let me give you some examples. COP 1997, that was the COP number 3, was very famous for the Kyoto Protocol, which made it legally binding on developed nations to reduce their emissions. Then it was also held in Delhi in 2002, famous for Delhi Declaration, which focused on development needs of poorest nations and the need to transfer technology. COP 16 of 2010 was actually famous for establishment of the Green Climate Fund That was the fund in which the developed nation was supposed to contribute money for the help of developing nation. Then the all famous Paris Climate Change Summit in 2015, where the nations agreed that they will take steps to stop the rise of global temperature well below 2.5 degrees Celsius and try to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius if possible. Then in Poland in 2018, a rule book was actually made to adopt the 2015 Paris climate change commitments. And last year in Glasgow in COP26, we saw India joining those nations which have announced net zero. India has also announced a net zero target of 2017 now. The next article that we have here is a report from the Health Ministry, according to which 21.4 lakh TB cases were notified in India in 2021. Now, every single year we keep a track of how many tuberculosis cases are being notified in India so that we can compare year on year how many cases are increasing or decreasing. So, India's TB incidence for year 2021 is about 210 per 1 lakh population if you actually take it as a ratio. We usually compare it with 2015 as a base year. If we take 2015 as a base year, then the number of TB cases being notified in India are actually declining. There has been an 18% decline, which is better than the world's average. Recently, as you know, WHO also released its global tuberculosis report, which said that over 1 crore people across the world fell ill with tuberculosis in 2021. Now, what happened in the world in 2020-21 was because the entire world was focusing so much on COVID-19 vaccination, COVID-19 disease, that most of the other diseases were actually neglected. Because of which we had a situation that a lot of diseases actually came back and their medicines and vaccines were unavailable. Because of which, in these 2 years, we see a lot of diseases coming back, be it tuberculosis, be it HIV, be it other kinds of diseases as well. And now the entire world has to work towards eliminating those diseases as well. The Indian government, as you know, runs the National TB Elimination Program, under which we are trying to ensure that all the TB cases are reported as much as possible. I've taken this screenshot from WHO's Global Tuberculosis Report of 2022 that actually talks about how WHO wants to end TB by 2025. This is called the WHO End TB Strategy of 2025. This screenshot gives you an idea about the goals set by WHO in terms of the target that they have set about how many children or how many adults should not have TB, how many households should actually be infected with TB, etc. All these details can be easily found online from WHO's Global Tuberculosis 2022 report. Let me share with you some major points from this report because I know you would not have time to read the entire report. So these are the major pointers from the 2022 Global TB report. As the article says, over 1 crore people fell ill with TB in 2021 around the entire world, and this was an increase as compared to 2020 numbers. Also, drug resistant tuberculosis means cases of tuberculosis when medicine does not work on the patient is also increasing because a lot of people are just eating antibiotics even when they don't require it, which is actually leading to all these kinds of problems. Specifically, the number of people who are being treated for drug resistant tuberculosis also has actually been a major concern for nations around the world. The global spending on the TB services has also declined in 2019 and 2021, majorly because the entire world is focusing more on COVID-19, its vaccination, its other medical facilities that have to be provided to the people around the world, and that is why focus on AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, etc. has declined. And this is why the report says that there is a need to now bring back the focus on tuberculosis, which remains a big problem even today. The next article that we have here is based on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's latest statement about UAPA. The Prime Minister of the country made this statement virtually in an ongoing meeting of Home Ministers of all the states being held right now in Faridabad. The Prime Minister said that UAPA, despite all the criticism that it is facing, is actually an extremely effective law. He said that the police across the country should be equipped to use UAPA perfectly, and the police should be equipped not just to face Naxals who have weapons with them, but also those people who are spreading false ideas, who are influencing the youth or misleading the youth with their writing. He said that those forces that get international support to work against the integrity of the country should be punished, and the police should be equipped enough to actually fight against them. He said that UAPA has strengthened the security forces and has strengthened the government's resolve to fight against those people who are actually working against the country. The Prime Minister also said that there's a need to put an end to false news being spread on social media. He said that people need to be educated about how to actually verify the news first before sharing anything on social media specifically. Now, the UAPA law, as you all know, stands for Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This has been in the news for multiple reasons, specifically because the opposition parties claim that this is a law that is misused by the ruling government against the opposition members of the parliament and the opposition leaders. Now, this law originally came up in 1967 and it is actually the premier anti-terror law used by the government of India. It has been amended multiple times since then in 2004 and 2008, giving more and more powers to the government and to the investigative agencies and to the enforcement agencies to arrest people, to deny them bail, and also to extract as much information from them as possible. The one big criticism of the law is that despite a large number of cases being registered, very few cases actually result in conviction. From 2016 to 19, 4,231 FIRs were registered under UAPA, but only 112 cases were resulted in conviction. Meaning that in all of the cases, government was accused of just pressurizing the people and forcing them to not criticize the government, otherwise they would face action in the UAPA Act. There are a lot of issues associated with this. For example, there is no proper definition of what will be considered as a terrorist act. Bail can be denied very easily. So anyone who is actually arrested under UAPA, if police have filed a charge sheet and there are reasonable grounds for believing that the accused may actually be a person who has committed a crime prima facie, then the bail can be denied very easily. Also, there is a huge pendency in the trial cases. So once a person is arrested in the UAPA, he or she is actually kept in the prison for a very long time. It gives immense powers to the government to arrest common ordinary citizens and term them as terrorists even without any major evidence against them. It also goes against federalism of India because police, as you know, is a state subject. Even then, laws such as the UAPA actually give so much power to the central government that they can order arrest of people under this act whenever they feel like. The next article that we have here is from Himachal Pradesh. As you know, Himachal Pradesh is going to elections very soon. And as it usually happens whenever there are elections in a certain state, before the elections, you will see a lot of political decisions taken in those states, especially with respect to reservation in jobs, reservation in education institutions, subsidies, etc. Now, what has happened is that the Hatti community in Himachal Pradesh recently was actually given the status of scheduled tribe, and this has led to a lot of protests in the state. The other people in the state are saying that Hatti community anyways was very empowered. They were anyways committing atrocities against the Dalits and other communities, and that is why they don't deserve to be included in the scheduled tribe list. Now, the article actually says that the other communities who are already a part of ST or scheduled caste are very unhappy. They're saying that Hattis are upper caste and they have already had a record of committing atrocities against the Dalits. This is just a political decision that has been taken. Now, from our point of view, it is more relevant for us to understand what the process is behind the inclusion of any tribe in the scheduled tribe list. As we have discussed earlier, the process to include any tribe in the scheduled tribe list usually starts with the recommendation from the respective state government. They send the recommendation to the Union Tribal Affairs Ministry. They review this request and they send them to Registrar General of India for their approval. After that, the next step is that the National Commission for Scheduled Tribe approves, and then the tribe is included in the scheduled tribe list after the final decision is taken by the cabinet. The cabinet is the one that will recommend to the president. Once the president says yes on the advice of the cabinet, the inclusion in the scheduled tribe list will happen. As you know, for any tribe that has become a part of the scheduled tribe list, they will get a lot of benefits, especially the benefits of reservation in government jobs and education institutions. Now, the Hatti tribe in Himachal Pradesh specifically is not a minority tribe. There is a significant population of this tribe across the state of Himachal Pradesh. Usually, they are engaged in selling of vegetables, crops, wools, etc. in small markets called hart. In fact, the name Hatti derives itself from the name Hart, that is the local market from where they actually send all their produce. This community has been making a demand for inclusion in the scheduled tribe list for a long time since 1967, and now this status has finally been awarded to them. These are the important articles we want to discuss on the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, the process of including a tribe in the scheduled tribe list leaves a lot to the discretion of the ruling government. Do you agree? Critically analyze. Second, the global fight against climate change is slowing down not because of lack of finances but because of lack of willingness. Elaborate. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.